Hi, this is Adam. This short story is from one of my listeners, Frankie Law. I really enjoy reading my listener stories in between my other recordings. So if you do have one that you would like me to read on my channel, you can submit it to me by email. Please like and subscribe if you enjoy. The proprietor of the old bakery would tell you that there was no difference between the yeast used to brew their beers and that was used for centuries to bake bread on the premises. Perhaps, he would tell you, that was why the spirits that lived in the walls tended to keep quiet these days, but it hadn't always been that way. The heyday of the bakery was a long time ago. It was said that nobody could remember a day, Christmas included, that the bakery wasn't open, nor had anyone ever arrived early enough that fresh bread wasn't yet on the counter. As such, the bakery was the most popular and well respected in the town. The baker was an old man, with flour-colored hair and brown hands. He woke up before first light as a point of pride and worked as hard as he ever had. One morning, the bakery didn't open. Message reached the baker's son, who rushed to the family home as a matter of great urgency, knowing something terrible had happened. Sure enough, he arrived to find his father laying still in his bed, being tended to by a nurse. Preparations were made for the funeral, and a will was found in a drawer at the bakery, bequeathing his son with the business. It entreated only one thing, that he would never be woken by the lark. But the baker's son soon broke his father's wish. After a long morning working his arms raw, he would head to the tavern to relax himself, only to oversleep and arrive at the bakery to a queue of angry patrons. Over time, as the reputation of the bakery continued to fall, the line of expectant patrons dwindled, and eventually he found himself struggling to make ends meet. One morning, the few customers who had remained loyal to the bakery were met by a sign nailed to the door. It said that the old bakery, regretfully, had to close, and that an application was pending to turn the site into a bar. 3 months later, a sign reading, "The old bakery," was hung on its hooks, and the new bar declared open. The baker's son had sold his house and moved into the room upstairs, using the money made in the sale to renovate the interior. The old thick timber roof beams were replaced by slender ones shipped over from America, and the ovens had been ripped out and sold to scrap merchants. The last of the money was spent replacing the old padlocked door with a grand new entrance in keeping with the fashion of the time. The bar was only open at night, so the baker's son was now able to sleep as late as he liked. At night, he drank foreign spirits with his patrons and laughed and told stories until the early hours. Business was growing and he was able to take on some more staff to help with serving and running the card tables for the gamblers. But before long, he was once again hit with misfortune. His new staff were often unable to show up, citing illness, and those that did were shifty and pale. One by one, they began to quit, none giving a convincing reason. The baker's son put an advert in the local paper for new employees, but all that applied did not seem to understand his vision. To a man, all that applied were men in their later years. They looked exhausted from a lifetime of work and probably couldn't find work elsewhere, thought the baker's son. Nonetheless, he needed help in the bar, so he had no choice but to take them on. The next afternoon, the baker's son stumbled downstairs to the bar, rubbing his head. He was met by a familiar smell, the unmistakable smell of freshly made bread. "For sandwiches," one of the new employees explained, flour dusted on his old-fashioned clothes. "The ceiling looks like it needs fixing," said another of them, who suddenly seemed familiar, squinting up. But the baker's son could see nothing the matter. He joined a table of card players and gave them drinks on the house. He knew he could fool these drunks out of much more money anyway, but soon it was he who was drunk and had to pay up. Vision blurry, he stumbled to find his money, but was met by a gathered crowd in the bar. He pushed past the assembled patrons to discover the scene of the two old men dragging one of the old timber joists through the doorway. The noisy crowd helped to pull down the new decor. The baker's son ran out into the street. It was the dead of winter, and there was snow on the ground. A policeman was standing under the yellow light of a street lamp, so the baker's son shouted out, "The old bakery?" said the policeman. Surely the baker would have locked it by now. The baker's son explained in desperation that the baker had died and that he had reopened it as a bar. But the policeman couldn't be moved, his frost-covered face expressionless, as if lost in thought. Exasperated, the man ran back to the bar. He tried the door, but that only rattled the chain of the padlock. It seemed someone had refixed the old padlock. He felt through his pockets desperately, but his father's key wasn't there. He had long forgotten where he'd put it. Just then, a thin shaft of light slowly licked up the wall to the window. He had lost track of time, and the first light of morning had spilled over the horizon. As soon as it had begun, the sound of the raucous crowd inside subsided, and the lights went out in the shop. He was startled by the shrill sound of a lark as it lifted from the old bakery's roof. The man peered through the window, and with horror, he saw the decrepit skeletal figure of his father, the counter already fully stocked.